Yeah, I know it kind of sounds like some people who may be listening, it may sound like we're un-American, like we're commies or something, but that's not true. Our government are commies. They're Bolsheviks. And you don't need to look any further than the Communist Manifesto. You don't need to look any further than the policies implemented the last 10 years, or the last 30 years, the last 100 years. And as I said, if it looks like a Zionist and it smells like a Zionist, it is a central banker. And central banks have caused every boom, every bust. They fund both sides of every war. And so we're not un-American. And I say God bless Americans.
I wanted to believe the founders are turning in their graves and what we've come to be. Tactics that destroy our freedom and civil liberties. Propagates never-ending war, performed by darling lanes. You can fool people some of the time, but you can't fool me. The Constitution can't defend itself, so you're going for guys like me. We'll bring it on, we prefer it straight, instead of lies and deceit. I'll be aware we know your game, our numbers you can't evade. Where do you think this will lead? Open your eyes and say, where do you think this will lead? You're building a killing machine. Think you can't stop it here. Open your eyes and see. Hijacked by a group of thugs and criminals in D.C. Don't let them intimidate you. Fear is how they feed. No matter what they throw our way, we must defend liberty.
Oh, well, as long as my voice is coming through good. False Flag. Thought that'd be a good way to start the show. I'm trying to do my levels here. False Flag, song by Sons of Liberty. Sorry, I was drawing a blank there. All right, welcome to Against the Wall. That was just an experiment. I'm still running the show on duct tape and bubble gum. But anyways, yeah, I thought that would be an apt way to start the show if it was working right. Was False Flag. We'll talk. Let's see. I mean, I guess there's three things to talk about right now. There's, babies from Central America, another Malaysian airliner, and Gaza. I mean, what else is there right now? Obviously, that's what I'll be talking about. Yes. I mean, all right. Well, before I even get there, welcome to Against the Wall. I'm your host, JJink. It's Sunday. I do my show every Sunday, 10 to noon, here at ucy.tv. I actually think that I have the phone set up right this week. I'm running my Skype through something different. 718-717-8296, I guess, if you so desire. One thing I want to remind everybody, all right, before we go any further, is that the Zionists use anti-Semitism. They foment it. So, be careful about how venomous you become, how extreme you become in your views, because that's part of the program. That's how they spread. So, that said, and I'll come back to Gaza here in a little while. We're going to talk. I'm going to talk just for a second. I'm going to go a little bit around. I got a couple of clips we can play today, depending on how much time I have. I've been really busy, but quite frankly, I've tried for the last couple of days to piece together this Malaysian flight. So we'll get to that. And it's right now. Who knows? Who knows what happened? But I'll get to that. There's a lot of very odd things. Yeah. I would jump. I don't think that you would be jumping out on a limb to say that it was a false flag. And it becomes more and more apparent. But anyways, Mexico, the Catholic Church is, first of all, there are children from Central America coming here to the United States. And they're doing it in secret. They're bringing them to your cities and now it's a big, every city in goddamn America, it's a race to see who can jump up and say, hey, why can't we take some of those babies so that our taxpayers can fund them? You know what I'm saying? Catholic Church here in Syracuse is trying. The Catholic Church in every city is secretly trying to bring welfare babies in MS-13 to your town. And they're not refugees, okay? They're not fleeing political prosecution. They're not fleeing war. Their parents are sending them. They're being encouraged by their government, by our government, by the Catholic Church, by our immigration and open border policy to send them here. And the one thing that all I can think is they come here thinking that life is going to be better, but it's not. The problems that brought you here come with you, and then you're going to churn, and then we'll all be poor here, and nobody will be able to help anybody. And the bankers win again. And so in Mexico, they keep these kids and they rape them, and then they send them up here. Thousands and thousands of them, all right? And they're not refugees. They're illegal aliens. And some would say it's an actual plan, planned up by the left wing. And you can see the ADL and the ACLU and some of these other, La Raza, some of these other groups that are hell-bent on destroying our country. And, and I keep getting this when I try to say something about Gaza, people telling me, yeah, well, look what you did to the American Indians. Well, look what the American Indians did to the Clovis man. We have a chance to stop. This is unacceptable in today's day and age. Okay, there was, it happened. The American Indians came here and wiped out the Clovis man who were already here. The Europeans came back later on and wiped out the American Indians. No, it's not fair and it's not righteous, but the deal is this, is we have a chance in Gaza, in Palestine, in Israel to stop an ethnic cleansing and a stealing of ancestral lands. That's the difference. It's too late to stop stealing the American Indians' land. It's too late to stop the Jews from bringing black slaves to America. It's too late to stop any of that. We got to focus on what we can stop now. And one of the things that you have to understand the most is that Zionists foment. They go around and they foment anti-Zionism or what they call anti-Semitism everywhere so that they can use that against us. So, stick to pointing out the Zionists and the freaking Israelis right now. Palestine is probably a little bit more important than our, preconceived prejudices of the tribe. And it is. You look at, you can't, we'll play right into their picture, but, right into their playbook. And our Congress, yes, they're on top of immediately blaming Putin for shooting down this Malaysian airliner. They're lockstep, arm in arm with Israel. 410 dead already in Palestine. 410 dead. A few dead Israelis. There were no dead Israelis when this started. 400. Of those 410, more than 300 are civilians. Of those 300, half are babies, half are children. So I don't know what you're going to do, but the Catholic Church, with the ACLU, with the Glenn Beck, Mormon Jews of the world are trying to flood, your own neighborhoods. I guarantee right now, if you go and you look in your city, your Catholic Church and your city council are fumbling all over themselves to be on the list of the people who care about the children. We care about the children. We care about them. And I'm not going to lie. I'd take a little freaking Guatemalan baby, or a child myself and raise it. But that doesn't mean that I want, most of these kids are going to end up in foster care, on welfare. Then their families will start coming up here. Then we'll be a third world nation. We're almost there. Almost a third world nation now. Yeah, all the news seems to care about are thousands of bottle rockets being launched at Israel from Gaza. As they cluster bomb and flechette bomb and machine gun housing complexes. And I've got some clips that we are going to get to. I have a hard time figuring out some of these things. This immigration thing. I know for a fact that they're sending over MS-13 and gangsters and thugs along with these, innocent children. It's not the kids' fault. And most of the kids are probably raped as they make their way through Mexico, and I'm not lying. And I'm not lying. And I'll say good morning to everybody out there at UCY.TV, UCY.TV media outlet, where you can get your information peer-reviewed. Trust me, anything you say at UCY is peer-reviewed. My peers let me know immediately, usually in chat room. My commentary is peer reviewed almost spontaneously, less a 10-second delay. And good morning to my mom, to everybody in the chat room, and I hope you all have a great day today. This is crazy here. Florida jury awards $23.6 billion to a widow in a smoking lawsuit, but you can't get a red frickin' cent if your baby dies from vaccines. This lady got $23 billion from the tobacco, from R.J. Reynolds. It took 5 or 6 jurors who read the case were 45 or younger, which meant he had to show them how the tobacco industry presented its product for the public awareness campaigns. Well, I mean, I remember as a kid all the, commercials, the cowboy smoking cigarettes. I mean, but it was part of a $145 billion class action lawsuit. But you can't sue a vaccine. You can sue the tobacco company, and there is direct correlation. I mean, yeah, $23 billion. And I'm not, listen, just because they say nobody knew, trust me, people knew cigarettes weren't good for you in the 60s too. They didn't smoke cigarettes thinking there was vitamins and minerals in them. But you can't sue a vaccine maker. I always got a kick out of the Marlboro Miles. I mean, you got these guys smoking 3-4 packs of Marlboros a day so they can get a rubber Marlboro river raft that they will never use. There's several cases as I spin in and out and wander aimlessly through the news today. There are several cases of vaccine symptoms or vaccine side effects. There are, in fact, several convictions for shaken baby syndrome when, in fact, they were vaccine side effects, vaccine injuries. Can't sue the vaccine, even if you can prove it. So there are several cases. You can put innocent men in jail, but you can't sue a vaccine company. You can sue a tobacco company. If I do something that endangers somebody, I can be sued. I can be held liable civilly. Well, listen, I've got some friends that work in it and have worked long-term for 20 years, 30 years in old folks' homes. There are people that are 93 years old that smoke every single day that don't have cancer. And there are people that die from lung cancer before they're 50. So it's more than just the tobacco. I have all kinds of action going on upstairs. I can hear, God, I'm 47, and now I'm hearing the pitter-pat of little feet. I love it. I love it because I don't have to chase him. I can just go up there and tell my daughter to chase him. So, yeah, $23.6 billion in punitive damages to one person, and her husband's already dead. I mean, I wonder what she's going to use that $26 billion to do, $23 billion to do. If she uses it to live lavishly, then she's a piece of shit. If she uses that money to raise awareness, to help, because let me tell you, man, I'm not siding with R.J. Reynolds. Those pieces of crap, douchebags, son of a bitches. They concentrate. You know, the tobacco you smoke isn't just picked, dried, and cut. It's picked, dried, and cut, ground up, and then soaked in chemicals. Then pressed into sheets and then shredded. Concentrated nicotine. I mean, you smoke a couple of packs of cigarettes and you got a frickin' monkey on your back. Pack of Marlboros is over $10 here in New York State. I don't even know where I'm going with this. I tried to play a song. I did something a little different. I did get my new mixer, but the parts for my computer are just not here yet, and so I'm doing something a little different today, just sort of. Yeah, don't let anyone, just because I'm a pure high grade indica oil broken record, don't think that that's the only thing out there. The truth is alkalizing your body, detoxing your organs are all great ways to make sure that you don't develop, cancer. Or make it hard. I wish I could quit smoking. I mean, I could. I guess I choose not to. I can still jog a mile. Roughly a mile. But I did stay in good shape for most of my life. It's only been the last few years that I've sort of... All right, now, I don't know if any of you guys have, been able to to make, other than to be able to just say, plain and simple, false flag, something ain't right. This other Malaysian, the one thing that I get from this is you have to handcuff and shackle and sedate me to get me on a Malaysian airliner. I wouldn't send, and I'll never fly again unless there's an emergency, but if the only way to get somewhere was on a Malaysian airliner, I'll count me out. Word up, count me out. I'm not going to do it. Seems like, if there's another incident with a Malaysian, and it's funny, they're always either leaving or on their way to Kuala Lumpur. Now, it's obviously my little conspiratorial mind, because that's where a lot of these war crimes tribunals, these citizen war crimes tribunals take place, where they've, declared 9/11 a lie, and Bush and Cheney war criminals, and Netanyahu is a war criminal, and it's not hard to make that case. If it wasn't for the vetoes of the United States and the Security Council, the UN, Israel would be singing a way different tune. So yeah, that's true. It is probably the only big airport in Malaysia. So that's probably, I don't care. The way it looks to me is, fool me 3 times, can't get fooled again. No, shame on me. If after the last 2 Malaysian air disasters, if you got on a Malaysian airline, man, you almost deserve what happened to you. So, well, we don't know. See, here's the thing. they were asked, nobody knows why they were off course, but they were asked to reduce their altitude. I mean, this is conjecture. There isn't any real solid evidence. This is just the illegitimate Ukrainian government claims. But I sure as heck wouldn't get on a Malaysian airliner. Now, this story just gets crazier and crazier. At first, it just the reports were that a Malaysian airliner, and they were saying it was heading out of Russia into Ukrainian airspace at first, and that's a lie. It was actually had flown over Ukrainian airspace and was just flying into what would be considered close to the Russian airspace. I don't believe, it's my opinion that it was, to me, because there's a lot of other things that keep coming out here. First, they're saying it was a Ukrainian Buk battery, which is an air-to-surface missile. Then they're saying it had to have been Russian separatists, and if it was Russian separatists, they had to have gotten their missiles from. But don't forget that the Soviet Union broke up, and all those Soviet bloc countries kept their Soviet munitions. And I don't know if I believe everything that I've been hearing, but here's something else now, one of the rebel commanders came out, and he's claiming that the victims of the wreckage had to have died. Crisis actors, yeah. I mean, these bodies, if you look, and obviously I can't show you pictures, and I can't even look at the gruesome pictures, but the photos they show are bloated bodies that were in various stages of decomposition. Like I said, I haven't been able to make heads or tails of this other than the fact that it's fake or false. And obviously, there is wreckage there, so a jet did crash there, regardless of the crisis actor, Sandy hoaxers out there. That part did happen. Now, was it shot down by an air-to-surface missile, or was it shot down by a Ukrainian jet? Who knows? I don't think, we'll never know, because we'll be told that it was Russian separatists. We have evidence that it was Russian separatists and that they couldn't have done it without Russian help. That's all we're going to be told by the U.S., by our media. So there's just so many things about that one that you're just, how that, you know what I mean? I know. I'm waiting to see if this, if there's a report. Trust me, this just happened. So in another week or so, we'll find out probably that there's a Boeing 777 matching the Malaysian Flight 17 TAL sign somewhere in Tel Aviv, like we did the other one. Wars are brewing, I guess. No matter what I do, I'm not going to be able to try and, I'm not going to be able to keep people from killing each other. Everybody wants to do it so bad. Half the alternative movement are dying to start killing people. Obviously, this is a false flag to blame Russia. and the separatist movement, and to lend credibility to the illegitimate government in Kiev. And I hear Barack Obama say, "They're our friends in the Ukraine." They're not our friends. They're revolutionary leaders of a violent, bloody coup. Another Western-backed, violent, bloody coup of a democratically elected leader of a foreign nation. Maybe those are the bodies from the other Malaysian flight. No, I'm not. But nothing here adds up. Everything we're told on our media is a lie, and so far nothing they've said was true. And the Ukrainian, the Russians have come out and said that they have radiation or monitored radiation from the radars of an air or of a surface-to-air SAM site. So it is a plane crash. You can only hoax so much. You have to have a little bit of solid evidence in there. So your guess is as good as mine. What I would say is that, and they throw in, there was possibly a cure for AIDS on that flight. There was possibly, not everything is green screened. And it's almost impossible to tell what is and isn't. But I guess what we could say is this was obviously not an airliner that was shot down by the Russians. Why the fuck would they do that? Why the hell would they do that? This was shot down, or it was crash landed. But there's people there that live in that area. They didn't just bring in trucks of wreckage and put it down. So somehow this plane came out of the sky. Now, I wouldn't doubt that it was the plane, one of the planes associated with the last Malaysian. Could have even been that plane. It's never been found. And they were way out of their flight path. And again, the information that's coming out of there, it's impossible. You can't believe the Russians, you can't believe the Ukrainians, you can't believe the Americans or the Europeans. So I don't know how you're going to decipher this. All I'd say is it's a false flag. And if it can be used to demonize Putin and the Russians, it will be. It was 300 miles off its, off course. Very unusual. Everything about it is unusual. So, if that plane wasn't flying 300 miles off its approved route, this wouldn't have happened. So I don't know. I don't know how we're ever going to get the real truth out of this. I think that you can reasonably, safely say that it was a false flag, that people may or may not have died. That plane might have been full of dead bodies already, you know what I mean? But there are eyewitnesses that say that a lot of the bodies they found were already decomposing. Yeah, so all right, moving right along. Moving right along here. this is just a by the way. I say false flag big time also. And I don't think that you can believe a word that you're going to get from any of the media, including the alternative media, because they have their own gatekeeping agenda also. James Garner died. Maverick died. R.I.P., man. Jim Rockford. Remember the Rockford Files? Man. So, my show will slowly, the gears of Against the Wall will slowly grind further. I just don't know what else I can say about this Malaysian airliner. You can't, I mean, there's nothing that you can read that you can say that is actually real. The only thing you can actually say is there's a jet and it's on the ground. You can't even really say whether it crashed, whether it was shot down, or whether it was brought in on flatbeds and just placed. There's no way to know any of that. And you've got all your alternative media guys running around saying that, you know, it's probably crisis actors. No, I'm just kidding. But everybody jumps to conclusions. There's no evidence. Someone here is saying there's evidence that shows that the Kiev junta sent fighters to shoot down this Malaysian airliner, thinking it was Putin's plane. Yeah, Jim Rockford got beat up on every show. He got punched and he like Captain Kirk. Always had this little bit of blood on the corner of his lip. I mean, there hasn't been enough investigation done, I guess. I mean, my opinion is it's a false flag. I don't know if there was even anybody really alive on that plane before it crashed. So, that said, having said that, I guess it's time to move on. You know, here's something that's kind of, that just galls me, is, hold on. The people in their 30s living with their parents. I mean, this is like epidemic proportions in America. In Obama's America, I guess. But this started long before Obama was elected president. This started long before Obama was elected president. But they call it the soft generation. People in their 30s going back home to live with mom and dad. And it's not like temporarily till they find a new home. I'm not lying. I've got friends who just moved back in with their mom and dad and have no intentions of ever moving back out again. 45-year-old men. 45-year-old men moving back in with their parents. Here's what we're going to do. Oops. Let's see if this will work. We're going to play a quick clip here. Okay, before I get to the end of the show, I wanted to mention Edgar and Cindy Steele yet again. Cindy came to Freedom Palooza. I'm going to play a quick 12-minute presentation that she did. Because don't forget, I mean, if you're going to be an advocate of free speech, it's free speech for everybody, and it's for all speech. This was Cindy Steele.
Poker Face, guys. You can thank Poker Face for putting this on. All right, now we made it a point to bring certain people here today, this weekend, because the First Amendment, because free speech, free thoughts, free ideas are for everybody, not just them. And we made a point to bring a couple of people that the Jew tried to destroy for having the gall to speak the truth or to defend unpopular ideas. Edgar Steele is one. I hope you guys go to EdgarSteele.com, freeEdgarSteele.com, and help out. There's hundreds of people on the stream right now. It's up to you to help us. Cindy? Thanks.
Good? Yeah, all day long.
Thank you. Please, you're going to have to excuse me. I'm losing my voice, so I hope you can still hear me. Fortunately, I have a mic. I want to let everybody know here that I have been very touched with the love and the acceptance and the support that I have received here this weekend, and especially the speakers, because what I am hearing is a lot of the same ideas that my husband started promoting back in around 1999, 2000. The ideas that have the government coming in and wrongly accusing him of crimes that he did not commit, of fabricating evidence and lying in order so that they could convict him and sentence him to a 50-year sentence, which for my husband is a death sentence unless I can win his freedom. It gives me hope. It gives me the courage to be up here and use my right of the First Amendment. And today, I'm going to take this time, since I am not allowed to see my husband. They have refused. I have not seen him in 2.5 years. And on this day, July 5th, I want to wish him a happy birthday, because I do not know if I will get to talk to him and personally wish him a happy birthday. I have to wait for my phone to ring. It is tied to me because sometimes he can't call me because he's in lockdown. Or sometimes he can't call me because they have let him suffer so much that he's about to die from pneumonia. And he's in a hospital alone, chained to a bed, shackled to a bed, and not getting the medical care that he needs. But I don't know about it until after he has, thank God, survived and returned to his cell. I fear the day that I have a knock on my door, and it is to tell me that my husband has passed away alone without his family and his kids. You know, it's one thing for me to go through that, but the crime is what my husband is having to go through, because he did have the guts to speak up and defend our First Amendment, protect the politically incorrect that we're speaking up. And I heard some conversations after my speech last night of being afraid of their loved ones speaking out and having the same thing happen to them. And I need to tell you, that's not the answer. I understand, probably more than anybody, I understand that fear. But if we don't continue to speak out and we are going to be letting them win one person at a time as they take them out. Because they have done this to others, and it still hasn't stopped them. There is Matt Hale, there is Schaefer Cox, there is David Hinksman, and a whole lot of other people. And the government has used the same tactics. We need to come together. And we each have individual ideas. I have heard Paul Tapetti say the 80%, and we can do that. Ed and I did that in our own relationship. He'd be on this side, of a debate. I would be on this side, but we would sit down and we would talk about it. And amazingly, it was just the approach that we had that really kept us on each side. And by the time we were done talking about it rationally, we came to the middle. And we really found out that we saw things a lot alike, with maybe only that 20% difference, and we could respect each other for our differences, because that is what our First Amendment is supposed to say. We are not supposed to be taken out and silenced because we speak out against the corruption in our government, the corruption in our judicial system. So, if you don't know what the story and the background is behind my husband, because you weren't here last night, I'm willing to talk about it. I'm not going to repeat it here because a lot of you were here, because my message is, please continue what Freedom Palooza is here promoting, of fighting against the corruption that we are all facing. And let's wake up the people. Roland Miller talked about the ostriches and I can't remember all the dodos and that. It is true. We've got to wake them up. It is a trigger moment. I remember my husband's trigger moment. It was when he was trying to sell his law practice in California so we could move our kids to a safer neighborhood and raise them out in the country like we grew up and give them a better life. This person came in and stole the business out from underneath him with underhanded practices and cost us our living. And he was a Jew, and that was my husband's first trigger moment. His second trigger moment was when he stepped up to the plate and represented Richard Butler. Now, if you don't know who Richard Butler is, he was considered the Aryan leader in Idaho and a white supremacist. Now, my husband didn't agree with everything that he believed in, but what he did believe in, because he was an attorney, he had the right to representation, as we are supposed to all have, and he most importantly had the right to the First Amendment. And Richard Butler, no matter whether you agreed with him, know who he is, or totally disagreed with him, he still had that right. He did not harm anybody other than somebody's feelings because he stepped on their toes with their beliefs. So, if you're already on board and you understand why we are losing control of our country and our Constitution and everything that our forefathers fought hard for us to have here in America, please go out there and start figuring out what the trigger moment is for other people, because we need numbers, and that's why I say we cannot be silent, and we cannot fear what's going to happen, and if something's going to happen similar to somebody that you love. God knows I pray every day that nobody has to go through what my family has. But I'm up here using my right to freedom of speech because I know my silence would be definitely 100% the final coffin in my husband's, the final nail in my husband's coffin. So I want to leave you with my greatest appreciation. I have learned that I have had more friends, and my husband has had more support than I have been aware of. And that is what helps me to stay strong, put one foot in the front of each other, and continue. God bless you all, and have a safe trip home, and may we come back here next year and find that we have more people awake, willing to step up, use their freedom of speech, and get us down the road back to our freedom and liberty. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Cindy. Free Edgar Steele.
All right, freeedgarsteele.com. That's free/Edgar/Steele.com. I'll drop the link in the chat room. And Edgar's written many books. All right, he wrote several books exposing the Jewspiracy, the ADL, the SPLC, and AIPAC. Made a lot of enemies, and they set him up. So go to freeedgarsteele.com. Now, I will play. She gave a 40-minute presentation where she laid out exactly what happened. Well, I'm not going to play that right now. In a little while, I got somebody coming on, and we're going to talk about lawful, legal language. I guess I'm not sure what he calls it, but that's what I call it. Now, a couple of years ago, I was turned on to this woman. Her name is Allison Weir. And I've never actually met her, but she has a pretty good understanding of what's going on right now in Palestine, in Israel. And I don't want to seem like I'm being lazy, but I want people to understand. I don't want to just sit here. I want you to hear it from the words of people who have been there, not just me from what I've read. So I'll just play this little clip, and I want you to pay attention, and I'll stop it periodically.
And Palestine 8 years ago. I was the editor of a small newspaper in Northern California, writing about the city council, the school district, the local fishing fleet. Like most Americans, I skimmed the headlines on this very important issue. I accepted the confusion that I found there, and I moved on. I'll be giving about 100 years of history in a few minutes, and I'll sadly leave out far more than I can put in. On our website, we have much more detailed information and many recommended books. But just to give you a sketch, because I did not know what was going on when I started my search, and what I thought I knew was really incorrect. The first thing that I learned was that when I was born, there was no Israel. It did not exist. There was Palestine, a region that had been around, of course, for many centuries, and so the question is, if Israel didn't exist when I was born, where did Israel come from, and where did this conflict come from? To answer that question, you don't go back 1,000 years or 2,000 years or whatever. You just go back to the late 1800s, and you find that Palestine was under the Ottoman Empire. It was a multicultural land, about 80% Muslim, 15% Christian, 5% Jewish, all living on the land, all practicing their religions fairly harmoniously, without significant conflict at all. So what happened to this land? You don't change places chronologically, but you do geographically. And you discover that if you go to Europe, there was a movement in Europe that started in the late 1800s called political Zionism that developed a wonderful shining slogan, a land without people for a people without land. Zionism, political Zionism in particular, was the belief that there needed to be a Jewish state somewhere in the world. They considered Uganda, Argentina, they considered parts of North America for the Jewish state, and eventually they settled on Palestine because of biblical connections from 2,000 years before. Now, if you'll think of that slogan, a land without people for a people without land, that I grew up with, it sounds wonderful. I think we would endorse that, except it was not a land without people. It was fully inhabited. One of the early Zionists that came wrote back to his family back in Europe about what he had found, Palestine. The simile was to a bride. And he said, I have seen the bride. She is beautiful, but she is married. So sadly, nevertheless, the immigration continued by Zionists to Palestine to create a Jewish state. And as we know, indigenous populations do not, especially over time, welcome their colonists with open arms, especially as the colonists increase in number and as it becomes clear that the intention is to dispossess 95% of the people who are already there. As a result, there was the tragic but predictable violence, with innocent lives lost then as now on both sides, then as now the vast majority of them, the Palestinian Christians and Muslims. The immigration continued and the violence continued over the decades, jumping ahead now to 1947. After World War II, the British had taken over the mandate from the Ottomans after World War I. After World War II, the British finally, with all the violence between the two groups and against the British Empire as well, decided to turn over the question of Palestine to the United Nations to solve. The United Nations at this point had the option of affirming a bedrock principle of democracy and of the United Nations itself, which was self-determination of peoples. Or they could revert to the medieval version where an entity, gives someone else's land away, divides it in half. Well, sadly, I believe for the world and for everyone, the United Nations, rather than affirming self-determination of peoples in which the people there would decide their own land, their own government, their own country, etc., they decided to recommend a partition plan in which half of it would be given to a Jewish state and half of it to a Palestinian Christian and Muslim state. Well, apart from it being coerced from an outside agency, not self-determination, let us examine this compromise solution to this conflict. Sometimes compromises are necessary, that's reality. But when you examine this one, you discover, first of all, it wasn't half, it wasn't 50-50. It was that one side was getting 55% and the other 45%. And the group that was getting 55% was not the group that had lived there for centuries and had originally been 95% of the population. It was the group, the newly arrived group. So the Jewish state was going to get 55%. To me, this made no sense. So I wondered, I knew that there was a lot of immigration. It had increased in numbers over the years, especially under the Nazi atrocities. So I thought, well, maybe they had become 55% of the population and perhaps it was a rational kind of compromise. Well, you look at the numbers, the immigration had caused a massive increase in population size, but it was still only 30%. So the group that was 30% was getting over half. That didn't make sense to me, so I wondered, well, perhaps it's land ownership. Land ownership could be a rational approach. This, in some cases, had been a well-funded immigration. The Rothschild banking family, in some cases, had funded some of these efforts. The intention had been to dispossess the people through just buying up all the land and pushing them out that way. So maybe they had succeeded and they owned 55% of the land. Well, the land ownership, the Jewish land ownership, had gone up significantly. Originally, it was around 1%. It was a very urban population. It had gone up to, at most, it appears about 8%. Most historians say 5 to 6%. So a group that, let us say, owned 8% of the land was being given 55% of the land. I think, as history has shown us, the more inequitable, the more unjust a situation is, the more violence that results, not the reverse. So rather than leading to more peace, it led to more violence. And there was an outright war, the war of 47 to 49. This war is called in Israel the War of Independence. To Palestinians and most of the region, it's called the catastrophe, al-Nakba, because it was a massive humanitarian catastrophe in which at least 750,000 human beings, it was probably it's quite the UN, I believe, or the British, some people say it was 800,000. It may have been even higher than that. At least 3/4, pretty much of the entire Palestinian population was forced off their land, violently forced through extremely violent means, including a number of massacres. Much of this violence, and I believe half the massacres, occurred before Israel had even declared independence. So the myth, if any of you grew up with the myth of 5 Arab armies besieging little Israel, may not know that a great deal of the ethnic cleansing occurred before a single Arab army had joined the conflict, and that even once the Arab armies joined the conflict, the force of the Arab and Palestinian forces were smaller in number and in weaponry, considerably smaller than the Zionist Israeli forces were. So there was a massive, what the Israeli historian Ilan Pappé has called ethnic cleansing. That really is the accurate term for what happened. These refugees, according to international law and according to international morality, have the right to return home. But Israel does not allow them to return to their homes. So this is one of the key factors in the conflict today, and it's a factor the U.S. media almost never talks about, but it's significant. Again, jumping ahead to some of the massacres during this period. To 1967, we find that Israel attacked, at the end of that war, Israel had conquered 78% of Palestine, so the Palestinians were down to 22%. Then in 1967, Israel again attacked its neighbors, as it did in every single war except for one. And in this case, they conquered the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and the Gaza Strip. These are occupied territories. They are not part of Israel, except for Israel decided to annex the Golan Heights. The people there don't agree to that, but that's what Israel did. The West Bank and Gaza Strip are occupied territories. They are not part of Israel. They are Palestinian territories. During this period, by the way, Israeli forces, this was the Six-Day War, also attacked a U.S. Navy ship operating in international waters, the USS Liberty. They killed 34 American servicemen, injured 174 of them. The decks were running with blood. This was, according to Admiral Thomas Moore, a former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, this was an act of war by the State of Israel against the United States of America. And this was an act of murder against American servicemen. Again, according to Admiral Thomas Moore, testifying on Capitol Hill, I believe it was in 2003. I was there. Highly significant testimony not reported in the American media. If you look on our website, you'll see it's in the Congressional Record. An op-ed by Admiral Moore was in the Stars and Stripes newspaper, and the Associated Press uncharacteristically actually did a story about that. Nevertheless, do a LexisNexis search and you just don't find, something like 10 newspapers out of hundreds reported anything to do with it. Since 1967, by the way, taking land by conquest is no longer legal under international law in today's world. In addition, moving your population onto that land, confiscating private land, kicking the people out, and putting your own population on is illegal. There is no doubt about this. And yet that is what Israel has been doing since 1967. Every single one of those red dots is an illegal Israeli colony on Palestinian land. The red dots in Gaza have been removed as they were required to be removed by international law. So those are no longer there. Instead, Gaza is just largely a prison. Israel controls the borders, the airspace, etc. So it no longer has those red dots. It's just one big prison. But the West Bank now increasingly, while those settlers were taken out of Gaza, the amount of land taken in the West Bank increased significantly, and the number of settlers that moved onto that land increased significantly. That also was not reported by our media. So there is a lot of context that is extremely important to know that our news media aren't telling us. When I began to look into this, this was all new to me back in 2001. I had not known this was going on. When I began to look into it more and more, after several months, it seemed to me that this was so significant that it seemed to me that if what I was starting to learn was true, then it appeared that our national interests and needs as a nation were the opposite of what we were being told, and our moral responsibilities as human beings were the opposite of what the media were leading us to believe. It seemed so important that I finally decided to quit my job and to go and see for myself. And so began the most unusual trip I've ever undertaken. Many years before, I had been in the Peace Corps in Afghanistan. In that case, I was taught the language, I was married, and I had a very official support system behind me, the Peace Corps. In this case, I was going to be traveling alone, and I had no support system whatsoever of any kind. As I landed on February 7th at 8 p.m., my return flight scheduled for 1 month later, I experienced a sudden pang of the disquiet I had been trying to ignore. What was it going to be like for me, as an American female, to wander alone through a Muslim land that was in the middle of a violent uprising and that was at the very epicenter of a region portrayed widely as extremely hostile to women in general and to Americans in particular? What was it going to be like? Well, as I wandered haphazardly and randomly throughout the Palestinian territories, throughout the West Bank and Gaza Strip, I discovered that once again, these are more myths about this region that are as untrue as they are widely held. I was welcomed and invited to stay in people's homes. I was treated with respect and completely safe, except when I came too near the Israeli military. I was welcomed whenever people heard that I was an American. The invariable response was welcome. And yet, this is what our media show us. Now they should. All of these pictures I'm showing you, I took myself, including these. This is what we see in our media that consistently reinforces Palestinians as terrorists, frightening images to us. If you look at this picture, sadly, I think I must have ruined the photograph that these photojournalists were taking because I was taking these pictures myself. This is a cardboard box that was being burned in what looks frightening in a funeral for a small boy who had been killed the day before. Now, yes, we should see these. I took them, I'm showing them to you. But it seems to me we should also see what most of the people looked like in that funeral. And this is what they looked like. This girl said to me, "Do you think we're all terrorists?" Because Palestinians know that's what Americans are led to believe about them. It seems to me we should see that there are, of course, still Christian Palestinians living there. You can meet them easily and ask them questions, as I did. I interviewed many, many people. That was my whole purpose of my trip. They all told me we are all Palestinians being pushed out by Israel. Muslims and Christians were just Palestinians. In this funeral, these were mixed. They're always mixed. Friends, friends working together, etc. This little boy, George, that was their son, he's holding a fragment of the missile that came through their home. His mother said he doesn't like his home anymore, and I understand why not. It's full of bullet holes. He's afraid to live there anymore. During my month of traveling throughout the Palestinian territories, I had found a population under siege. Throughout Gaza and the West Bank, I found that people were being kept virtually in prison. There were military checkpoints that limited and sometimes totally prevented you from leaving your town and going to the next town over. There were people living just outside. There were teenagers living just outside the incredible city, the religious and cultural center of that region, Jerusalem, who had never been in there. It's like having teenagers that are just outside of Cleveland that have never been into Cleveland because they're not allowed to in. They're the wrong kind of people, and they're not allowed in. And by checkpoints, I don't mean toll booths or something. I mean armed soldiers in combat gear. In Gaza, I grew used to almost arriving at a street corner and finding young soldiers in tanks with fixed machine guns aimed straight at you. You hoped they waved you on rather than shooting you, as they had some people. At night, You couldn't really see the soldiers very well, but you saw the flashlight with which...
That's the reality of life in Gaza, not the reality for the Israelis, like they would have you believe.
They signaled whether or not you were allowed to continue driving, to continue living. This was routine. But in some parts, there was more. It's sort of like here, some parts are less desirable areas to live in than others. In Palestine, they're being shelled, sometimes nightly. This is still going on. I went through residential areas that were bullet-riddled, with homes with large holes through the roofs and the walls. I found that if the people were lucky, they had abandoned their homes. They only lost their home that was their shelter in old age. They had somewhere else to go. Many people, I discovered, were still living in these homes. They had mattresses in the center, or someplace that they hoped was less likely to sustain a direct hit that would kill them and their children. As I was being shown around this area, people were coming up to me and smiling at me over and over. They were welcoming me to Palestine, and they were taking me to show me their homes. Children were bringing me, when they saw that I was curious about all the spent bullets around, they were bringing them to me by the handfuls. And as I was going around this area and people were welcoming me and smiling at me, and I was seeing Swiss cheese homes, suddenly there was more gunfire right near me. It wasn't whizzing. We ducked, and they took me out the sort of safe way out of their home and away from the gunfire. As I wrote in an email later, I didn't think these bullets had anything to do with me. It was just a coincidence. Well, later and still, I don't think that was a correct assessment. As I was going around this area, this was the Tufa area of Khan Yunis in Gaza. As I was going around it, I occasionally peeked over sandbag barricades, or very carefully, I promise you, through slits in the shutters, and I could see the Israeli guard towers there, overlooking us. I have no doubt that the Israeli soldiers saw that a foreigner was going around, and they finally decided to send her a message. Don't come here. Don't come to Palestine. Don't tell Americans how their money is being used. This would have fit their pattern. Again, the American media don't tell us that, but Israeli forces shoot, injure, and occasionally kill journalists all the time. Now, they're usually Palestinian journalists. Maybe our media just don't think they count. But some have been German, Italian, British, American. We just don't hear about them. One was a 26-year-old American correspondent for AP. She was shot in the abdomen. It destroyed her spleen and her uterus. I learned this from a British photographer in Gaza. I was skeptical. I'd never heard about that. Well, in fact, I even read later that the Israeli military had admitted that she was an American, and they court-martialed the soldier who had done it. Now he has another job, and she has an abdomen missing a spleen and a uterus. If this had been done by Palestinians, it would have been headlines. Why didn't we read about it? In Gaza, I saw beautiful agricultural lands being destroyed. I saw ancient olive groves uprooted. I saw 100-year-old date palms next to the sea that had been flattened. I talked to farmers who had farmed there forever. Their fathers, their great-grandfathers, their great-great, going back sometimes 19 generations or more, had farmed that land, and now they were destroyed. I wondered, what would they do now? How do you feed your family when your farm is destroyed? It occurred to me that when and if they were allowed out of Gaza, and they haven't been, and this was back in 2001, maybe they would join the massive Palestinian day laborers at some point. This is what I saw in Gaza, along the beautiful blue Mediterranean Sea. I saw a people and a land being destroyed. To me, this is newsworthy. I talked to people who were, at this time, at 5 months, had been out of work, were the only ones still working for an extended family of 40. Of course, it's far worse now than it was then, as I just saw on my most recent trip. We're somewhat used to seeing images of third world poverty. I think we're troubled by them, but we tend to think there's so much. What can we do? This is not what I was seeing in Palestine. I was seeing intentionally created poverty through the use of my tax money. I talked to women living in tin shanties and tents in the dirt. They had had homes. One woman had had 2 homes. She had just bought one for her son who had just gotten married. Both homes had been destroyed by Israel. The international community, in its generosity, had provided her a tent without a floor. So I sat with her in the dirt, and Palestinians are almost invariably welcoming, gracious hosts. She gave me sweet mint tea and asked me to tell Americans about them. And I told them I would try, and here I am. And I saw more. I don't like seeing suffering. I don't like seeing children in pain. But if I wanted to know what was going on in Palestine, and since thousands of Palestinian children have been injured through the use of my tax money, then I needed to see that. And they're not hard to find. I just went to the nearest hospital, as I did recently again. You see children with bullets in their back, in their stomach, in their teeth, in their head. I saw a brain-dead 12-year-old. His crime had been throwing stones at tank-wielding soldiers. I saw children who will never walk again. Their childhoods are finished. They won't skip, they won't frolic. That's it. I saw parents who were happy to see me. They thought that as an American, perhaps I could bring help for their poor, destroyed children. I asked the doctor if perhaps there was help that could be provided in the U.S. Maybe a doctor could be flown in, or maybe the children could be flown to the U.S. And the doctor told me in front of the parents, they didn't speak English. He said he hadn't yet found the right way to tell the parents, but that their son was totally and internally paralyzed. And so I knew something they didn't know, and I wished I didn't. And now you do too. And this is what I saw in Gaza. And then I went to Ramallah. I visited a newspaper office where there were sandbags against the bullets that Israel shot at them. At one point I was sitting writing a news story that, of course, was never published anyway. And they pulled the curtain aside and showed me a bullet hole right at head level next to where I was writing, and we all laughed at this sign of violence and danger. When I first arrived at this newspaper office, they said, a 9-year-old boy was just shot nearby. Maybe you'd like to go see. And again, I thought, no, I wouldn't like to go see. But I was there for all of us, and I went. And I took pictures of the blood going up to his home. I interviewed the student in the floor below who told me what had happened. 2 men had had some sort of dispute down below in the street. One had fired 2 or 3 shots, and then the Israeli military in front of the Israeli colony, overlooking at us, had let loose 10 to 15 minutes of heavy firing, high-velocity projectiles at this condominium full of families at this residential neighborhood. And one of the bullets had killed the little boy upstairs. I went up there, and I saw where he had been sitting watching his father paint the wall. I saw the toy trucks on the bed, the blood on the floor. I saw the wall hanging in the living room that had a bullet hole in it that said in English, "Thinking of God makes our hearts grow calm." I saw the needlepoint over the front door that said, "God bless our home." The family had moved in 10 days before, I was told. I saw the flowers in the living room, the family photos on the wall, and I saw the parents when they returned from the hospital. I heard the mother and sisters weeping and weeping, weeping and weeping. I saw the father walking around shell-shocked. It looked to me like he was in a bad dream that will never end. I saw the neighbors come in to try to comfort them. I heard one man, when it looked like the father was about to break down, tell the father, "Your son is a bird in heaven now." The next day, I went to the funeral, and the next day I went to another one. There are so many funerals to go to. This one was for a woman who had 3 children, 18, 14, and 12. She had been coming home from the market, and she had been killed. At one point, I found myself walking next to a woman who it turned out was the dead woman's neighbor. She told me that this woman had gotten a master's degree in American literature, I think at Iowa. She told me that her friend just a few days before had been asking about what it was like to go to college in America because her 18-year-old son had been asking her, what's it like to go to college? He wanted to go to college in America. And this woman told me it's every boy's dream in Palestine to go to college in America. But she said he won't go now. He'll stay home to help with his brothers. And this is what I saw in Ramallah. And then I went to Bethlehem, where I saw an infant. He was in a hospital, and his mother hadn't been allowed to visit him for months, her sick baby, because she wasn't allowed out of Gaza to visit her baby. And I saw one home after another that had been destroyed, and pictures of children that had been in those homes, foolish children, and had been killed. And I remembered going around Rafah in southern Gaza and seeing the destroyed homes there. And I remembered sitting with a family whose son had owned a second-hand shoe store, and they had told me how he had been killed when he had his key in the lock, getting ready to open it for the day or close it. I'm not sure which it had been. And I remember talking with another family nearby in Rafah, and they asked me why Israel was doing this to them, why America was doing this to them. And I found it hard to answer their questions because I was so tired of telling people, Americans don't even know what we're doing to you. Our media don't tell us. And as I left and they waved goodbye, there was more gunfire all around. And the gunfire was coming from one direction only, the Israeli direction, as in every situation I witnessed on that trip. The only time that I saw guns, Palestinian guns, that were about to be used for something other than signaling grief in funerals, or bravado, was in another part of Rafah at a sandbag barricade when Israeli armored vehicles were starting to move in, and tanks. And then I noticed a crowd of boys and men were starting to gather to throw stones against those armored vehicles. And I didn't take any pictures on that trip of Israeli soldiers and tanks. It seemed unsafe to do that, especially for the people around me, so I didn't take those photographs. And then these three young men, I noticed there were three young men that had guns, and they asked me not to take their photographs. So I didn't take that photo either. But I wish I had that photo to show you, and I wish I had pictures of the Israeli armored vehicles. And then you could decide about these young men. How foolish they were, or courageous, or brave, or suicidal, or patriotic. I don't know. And maybe you can tell me why we need to keep buying their conquerors new and bigger weapons, and then explain this to me. And this is a little of what I saw in Palestine. But it's not what I saw when I came back to the U.S. I went to the library in Sausalito, and I took out every San Francisco Chronicle that had been published during the period I was there. And as I sat in the library that day, I had the pile of newspapers. I wrote down a synopsis, the headline and the synopsis of what each newspaper contained. And as I sat there, I was appalled at what had been considered news coverage. I saw headline after headline after an Israel under siege. I had spent 2 or 3 days in Israel. I had taken crowded buses, taxis, I joined throngs of shoppers, I had sipped a cappuccino at a cafe, and I had thought about what was going on just out of sight, just a little ways away. I noticed that although the Chronicle didn't have room for the story about 9-year-old Obai who had been killed, or paralyzed children, or women drinking tea in the dirt, but I noticed that on the very day that Obai had been killed, 9 years old, that the Chronicle did have room and did publish a very long story about children who had tragically been killed over 50 years before, in a Holocaust that it is too late for the world to prevent. Instead of telling us about what is going on now, that we, if we chose to, could stop. One time while I was in Gaza, not staying with families the way I often did, I was in a hotel room, and I sat down to write another news report about what I'd seen that day, that I now know wouldn't have been published anyway. But instead of writing a news report, I found myself writing a letter to Americans back home. I'll read it to you now. Come to Palestine and see how your tax dollars are spent. Visit a hospital with me and see a boy with a bullet hole in his back. See children with scared eyes and legs that don't work anymore. A terrified old man whose neck is swathed in bandages from the bullet that passed through it as he sat in his home drinking his tea. Come with me and visit mothers of dead, injured, gone children, thousands of them, and tell them how you didn't know we supplied the weapons that ripped flesh, broke bones, destroyed lives, destroyed lives. Talk to old women who are made to kowtow to Uzi-toting 19-year-olds who tell them, no, you can't go to visit your son today. No, you can't take a drive in the country. No, you can't go to the hospital and have your chemotherapy, your dialysis, your operation, and watch as they die. Come to the borders with me, invisible lines in the sand between towns that Israel has drawn with its tanks and helicopters and 200 nuclear weapons. And watch the women with difficult births deliver dead babies and then die themselves at military checkpoints, death points, when soldiers with their ultimate power decide not to let them pass. Listen to these young warriors with their lethal weapons and deadly tempers proclaim, we've decided to close this road, and if you don't like it, we'll shoot you, as we already have 10,000 of your countrymen. Don't look at us wrong, or we'll shoot out your eyes, as we have 28 of your children. We're not cruel. We left 27 of them with one eye. Go home, Arab, and wait, and pray we don't decide to shell it, as we have thousands of those others who were in our way, with the wonderful singing missiles the U.S. gives us. Go harvest your crops, Arab, until we decide to bulldoze your 100-year-old date palms and ancient olive groves, your strawberry fields forever gone. Come to Palestine, Americans, and see your tax dollars at work, millions and millions of them, every day, and weep with me for our victims and our guilt, and then say, no more. Thank you.
That was Allison Weir. She obviously isn't very popular. And her message isn't very popular. Especially if you're a dual citizen in the United States. In the ADL, and the SPLC, and AIPAC, in the Senate, in the Congress, in the House. In both houses of the Congress, rather. All the media talks about is, matter-of-factly, the Israeli operation. And that's how you can tell how just thoroughly controlled our leaders are. I have a clip from Cynthia McKinney. I don't know if I'll play it. I don't think I have time. But don't forget, this is one thing that you can't forget, and this is my biggest problem with all the people that play the stupid fucking Jew Jeopardy and hate this and hate that bullshit. Zionism is spread by anti-Semitism. They use the hate, they foment it, they show you, they give you reasons, and then they call your reaction anti-Semitism, and they're not even Semites, but you can't let that freaking control you. We can stop what's happening in Gaza, all of us. We couldn't stop, like I said, it's too late to stop the Jew slave trade, the genocide of the American Indians. That already happened. But this is happening right now. It's happening now, and you can stop it. And more already. There's 3,000 to 4,000 casualties. 90% of them are civilians. 1 in 10 are not, or are considered what would be considered. Pretty soon they'll just consider all Palestinians combatants, and so then they'll all be military targets. You know what I'm saying? We did it. The Americans did it in Iraq, and so that's what I'm saying. Is you got, no matter what your personal feelings and beliefs are, you got to be rational, articulate when you're dealing with these people. Because just because we outnumber the elites, let me tell you something. The liberal, left-wing, bleeding heart, professionally appalled, aghast people outnumber us immensely. The self-important, yuppie fucking douchebags that surround us in this country are all quasi-pro-Zionist. It's okay to kill Palestinian babies, but I can't say fag on the air. I can't say that's gay when I think something's stupid. Something can be done. Their days are numbered. But you can't let that be used as a weapon against you. All right, I'm going to try to see if I can get my guest on here. Let's see. Boom. We'll try to throw him in right now. And it's ringing. Mike? Well, he might have stepped away. Oh, here we go.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm good. You?
I'm doing very well. This is you're on Against the Wall right now.
Oh, cool.
All right, now Mike was introduced to me by a friend. We have a common friend, or a friend in common, Jazzer, who neither one of us has spoken to recently. So this is like a cold interview. But what I can gather from speaking to you briefly the few times that we've spoken is that what we can talk about is the sort of language that's used against you in court.
Yep.
All right, so why don't we just start with Mike, with you introducing yourself, any of your affiliations, or do you have a website?
I have a website I just started. I'm not very good with computers. I got a friend that started a website for me. There's nothing on it, so. Okay.
Well, what?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to get rolling. When you have discussions, where do you usually start with this topic?
I usually I have a talk show call. I just pretty much, it's wide open. I'm not organized. I got no structure or whatever. I usually just let people come on the call, and whoever wants to talk about whatever, it's pretty much wide open. Well, there's a few friends of mine that come on there all the time. People come on, ask questions, and we all kind of work together to come up with ideas.
All right. So we start, the place to start is what, before you're even arrested, or once you get into court? Because the language legalese is used against you right from the start, right?
Oh yes, yeah, right on the side of the road.
So let's start with, and we'll start with the traffic, but they use it in all contract law too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's surprising. They use it everywhere. We don't even know half the time we're using it on the street. Yeah, words are very important. It's very surprising how little people actually know the words they're using.
Okay, so starting with a traffic infraction, then, I mean, the first thing that they try to get you to do is to incriminate yourself, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's actually kind of funny when you actually figure out the game and understand what's going on, but when a cop pulls you over, there's a bunch of things before they even pull you over that's ridiculous, but when they pull you over, a cop will come to your window and he'll say that he'll ask for your driver's license or demand your driver's license, whatever. And so you hand them your driver's license, which I don't know how up to speed everyone is, but the driver's license doesn't belong to the man. It actually belongs to the state, but it is issued to your person, not to you, the man. It's your person. And so the cop's holding the card in his hand. He looks at the card, he looks at you and says, "Is this you?" And everybody says yes. So you admit to being the person right on the side of the road. So you're not even a man anymore. You become a slave or a member of their little government society.
What do you advise? What would you...
I don't know how familiar you guys are with Carl Lentz, but Carl's thought of just about everything. But instead of arguing with the cop or trying to put him through a quick law school and tell him your rights and all that other stuff, because you're just going to get tasered and thrown in a cage.
Exactly.
What Carl recommends, which I think is brilliant, is just ask the officer, is that in order? Be very nice, very polite, but just ask him, is that in order? And a lot of the times they'll say, absolutely. And you say, no problem. Hand them your driver's license. Thank them for your ticket, whatever, go on your way. And according to contract law, you have 72 hours to back out of any contract. So you just go down to the courthouse, bring it to the prosecutor's office with a note attached to it, and just say that I would photocopy it first, but bring it in and tell send it with a letter saying that I believe this ticket has been issued in error. Ask the prosecutor if he believes you were operating under a license at the time, and you want to keep the letters nice and short. If it's a really long-winded letter, or if you're asking too many questions, they're just going to send you the old letter back saying you better get yourself an attorney, Sonny, before you hurt yourself. If you keep letter very short and ask one or two questions, he's going to look ridiculous telling you to get a lawyer or telling you that he doesn't give legal advice. But the trick is to use words like, well, say I a man, and say stuff like words like wish and believe, because only a man can wish or believe. Obviously, a brick building or a filing cabinet can't believe anything.
Right, nor use the word understand.
Yeah.
That's one I've come to realize.
Yeah, there's well, it's amazing what words really mean. I go to a website called etymonline.com, and as in like etymology.
Right.
But you'll be surprised. Look up words like suffer. People say, oh, they suffered injuries by the cop. If you look up the word suffer, even in, I don't ever look in Black's Law Dictionary because that's all legal society crap. But even in Black's Law, it'll tell you that suffer means to allow, to permit. So you have to, yeah, if you suffer a broken
never suffer a fool, which means to never allow a fool to be in your presence.
Yeah, and was it thou shalt not suffer a witch to live?
Exactly.
Yeah, so if you tell the judge that you suffered a broken arm, that doesn't mean
Right, you're saying that you allowed your arm to be broken, right, in a nutshell?
Yeah, it's just consent.
Pretty just a matter of fact, yeah, consent. Now, what happens when the first thing that happens, now you've already gotten the ticket, because, listen, if you're going to get the ticket, you're going to get the ticket. The only thing I ever ask the cop is if I'm free to go. If they're not, you know what I'm saying, they ask you for your license and your registration, and what else are you going to do? You give it to them, and you answer no. I never, they ask you, the first thing they usually ask you, do you know why I pulled you over? And I always say no.
Yeah, absolutely. I have no idea why.
You know how fast you were going, and then I just don't answer that question. I remain silent and ask if I'm being given a ticket or if I'm free to leave.
Yep.
Because really, you're not in court yet. You're on the side of the road, and the guy's got a gun, and you don't have one.
Yeah. It doesn't make sense to argue with a big man with a gun.
So the first thing that happens is when you get to court is they read you an information, and then ask if you understand.
Yeah, it's it's funny too if you go to edamonline.com and look up the word idiot. It's amazing because it means private person. It means an outsider, not part of a certain society. So if you're an idiot to the legal system, you're incompetent to understand anything they do. Because it's all legalese, it's not English. And if you look at another thing, if you look on Edom Online, look up legalese, and it's actually a word that's been around for a long time. It's not just a sovereign, free man, made-up thing. It's actually a real word.
Right, and to be sure, in the mainstream media, they use the word sovereign and cop killer in the same sentence every time.
Yeah.
Don't let that happen to you.
Yeah, as soon as you start saying, "Oh, well, I have rights," as soon as you say that the magic word rights, they'll say, "Oh, what is it? Some free man crap? What are you, a sovereign?" But yeah, it's a label they want to pin on everybody these days. It just makes you look bad in court.
Right. So what happens? What now? When you say when the judge tells you, "Do you understand?" First of all, what does understand mean in legalese?
Actually, that's one of the words I'd never looked up yet.
I think it means literally to stand beneath.
Yes, I think that's a very good possibility. I've never actually looked it up to confirm that, but I believe it's possible for sure. If even in common parlance,
I believe it's you're immediately, if you understand, you immediately consent. You immediately give your consent, and you're then a slave to the proceedings.
Yes. Yeah. Well, if you're say you're part of a club and the club has rules, you're supposed to act accordingly under those rules. You stand under what's put before you. But even in common parlance, understand means to comprehend. And that's huge because how fair would that be to throw somebody in a cage when they don't understand what you're saying, they don't understand
you enter into a contract with them if you understand right there from the start is what is actually the way I come to understand it.
Yes. But they're
and isn't that what you're actually trying to avoid? The whole premise behind our conversation is to not enter into agreement with the court, with the judge, with the system.
Yes, yeah. The big trick, not so much with the officers, but with the lawyers, and certainly in court. They're wordsmiths. They'll beat the crap out of you with words. You don't even know what's coming out of your mouth, no matter what your paperwork says. There's a word called novation, which is basically a replacement or to switch. So you go in there and you have the best paperwork anyone's ever seen. You file your paperwork. As soon as you go into court, you open your mouth, you say something stupid, and you novate your paperwork. You just negated everything your paper said. So that's how they get jurisdiction over you. They make you say something stupid. Their whole game is based on consent, confession, and we give it to them every time.
Right. Consent. All right. You actually, what can we talk about a case or a ticket that you've used this method with? Haven't you?
I don't drive, so I don't get speeding tickets and parking tickets and stuff like that. I'm a pretty good boy that way. I don't really do anything wrong. I'm dealing with family court. I don't really want to get into really anything.
Yeah, we don't have to. I've dealt with family court.
But yeah, every time I go to court, every time that I have a bad day in court, it's always days where I open my mouth. It's all about the paperwork. You write out, you get your paperwork, put everything that you need to say in it and nothing more.
And then don't say a word, right?
Yeah, you keep your big gate shut. If you get asked a question, write your answer down and only write stuff like everything that's in your paperwork. You don't say anything outside your paperwork because that's all they're doing is they're saying, wow, this guy's paperwork is great. We got to get him to say something.
So what you do is just refer to your paperwork then, right?
Yes. Yeah, but you'll write stuff like, I, a man, do not believe I have done wrong, or I do wrong. You want to keep everything in the present tense. There's another thing about codes too is it'll say something. Here's a good example of words. They'll say something. The statute, not law. The statute will say something like, "No person shall operate a motor vehicle unless da 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 da."
Right.
First of all, you're not a person. You're a man. A person is a corporation. Shall is a big one. Shall is future tense. So they're saying in the future, some point in the future, shall. And then they use the word operate, which is defined in their code. It's a commercial term. And then they say motor vehicle, which is also a commercial term. And so right away, you just hung yourself several times with just a few words. So you don't want to use words like operate, motor vehicle, drive, because that's all commercial. It's actually defined in their own codes. But that's an example of how
they have whole books just to define the words that will be used in their book. Yeah,
because that's a huge mistake a lot of people make before they start learning this stuff. They're using they want to impress the judge and show off how smart they are, and they use all these big lawyer words, and they're just shooting themselves in the foot by trying to be a smarty pants. The idea is speak like Fred Flintstone, Jed Clampett, just very basic words, 1 or 2 syllable words, maybe 3 if it's a very common word, but if you're using 4 syllable words, you may as well just throw away your own key.
All right, so what's the difference between law and statute and code, do you know?
Law is very easy. It's do no harm. So a harm would be a trespass. Some people refer to it as a tort. I don't like the word tort, T-O-R-T. But a trespass, there's 3 basic trespasses, which would be harm, loss, or injury. A harm is like, say you punch me in the nose or you kick me in the leg. That hurts. That's a harm. An injury is to property. So if you walk by and you scratch my car, you've injured my property. Which is funny because the legal society cannot acknowledge a man. They can only deal with persons. Man created the government, so they cannot harm a man. They can't do anything. They can't punish a man. That would be like us saying, well, God made it rain, so I'm going to punish God for making it rain. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Okay.
So where does the government feel they have authority over a man. The difference is if a man causes harm to another man, then that's actually a broken law. But the other trespass would be a loss, harm, loss, or injury. A loss would be like a breach of a contract. If we have a contract and you fail to keep your end of the bargain, it's going to cause me some kind of a loss, whether usually a monetary loss.
Right.
So that's, a man can only really do three things: a harm, loss, or injury. Anything that, a good way of looking at it is, I have the right to do anything I want as long as I'm not causing harm to anyone. So my rights stop where another man's rights start. As long as I don't cross the line and start interfering with their rights, I'm good.
Right. And you're not causing harm.
Yes. So no breaching contracts, no destroying property, and no causing like physical pain.
Okay, now statutes and codes. Most traffic laws are actually just statutes, right?
All traffic laws are statutes. If you don't wear your seatbelt, you're not hurting anyone. You're not causing any harm, loss, or injury. If you fail to stop at a stop sign, you've done nothing wrong. If you go through a stop sign and you hit somebody, you've done something wrong because you've caused harm, loss, or injury, maybe all three. But if you do cause harm, loss, or injury, you have a duty and an obligation to compensate that man or woman for the harm you've caused. Whether that be pay their medical bills, buy them a new car, if they have a broken leg, go to their house and cut their grass and whatever. You got to make it up to them. Insurance companies take a lot of the blame for this. I give them a lot of blame for this because one side of it is an insurance company says, well, if you don't have your seatbelt and you get in an accident, you're going to fly out the windshield of your car and you're going to get really hurt, and then we're going to have to pay out a lot. So we want a law passed where everybody has to wear a seatbelt so we don't have to pay out as much.
Right.
And another thing about insurance is if I get in a car accident, who cares? My insurance is going to pay. And that just takes all the responsibility off the man or woman, and it makes people irresponsible. Back in the day, if you say you did something stupid and you caused a man to die, you would be on the hook to support his wife and kids forever because you've taken their breadwinner away. And that was a very serious thing back in the day. Now nobody cares. My insurance will cover it.
Right.
I'm covered. And everybody's irresponsible now because the liability's been taken away.
Okay. I think I can follow that. So, how do you apply that? What do you say to people that make the claim that you're just trying to beat the system, to not follow the rules, to just do whatever you want and not have to suffer any consequences? I'm not one of those people, by the way.
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous because I am equal to any other man, so why would any man have any authority to tell me what to do? My obligation is to my Creator, to my family, to my fellow man.
And to cause no harm, right?
To do no harm. So
that's pretty basic.
Yeah. How hard could it be? It's 3 words. Do no harm. But that's part of the whole involuntary servitude. How can you order another man to do anything unless you're going to compensate him for the order? You go to McDonald's and you order a Big Mac. They say, "Can I take your order?" And you order them. Make me a Big Mac. They go and they make a Big Mac, they bring it back to you, and you pay for it. It's very basic. So that getting back to the traffic stop, cop says, "Let me see your driver's license." Is that an order? Absolutely. Okay, here you go. Now he's liable for a bill. But you don't tell him that on the side of the road. Nobody wants to get tasered.
Right.
So you just keep your big mouth shut. You go home and you write out a bill. And you send them a polite letter. Greetings, Bob. Thank you for your orders or whatever. I complied with your orders. Here's the bill. And don't make it some ridiculous number. Just charge them something like $50, $100. If you go charging like $180 million, obviously you're going to get laughed out of court. You're not going to see a penny.
Or $10.
Yeah, just something little. It's
a service fee.
Yeah, it's an education for that cop because he's gonna take it to his boss and say, yeah, some idiot gave me a bill. And who knows if his boss knows the deal or not, but his boss is going to take that bill to a lawyer, and the lawyer's going to be, wow. There's a man out there that's awake.
Yeah.
They're going to say this is a legitimate bill. And then it's up to him to say, well, do I want to roll the dice on this, or just do I want to pay it and make it go away? Or so there's a few ways of handling it. You could give the ticket back and say it was issued in error, let them know that you're a man, and that you weren't operating under a driver's license. It's always good to ask questions, because if you ask questions, then it's up to them to open their big mouth, and they get to hang themselves with their own tongue.
And to be sure, they might just, railroad you anyways.
Yeah, there's a good chance they'll ignore it.
But you have to be prepared for that. Look, man, freedom has sometimes freedom takes effort, and sometimes standing up takes a little bit of effort, and sometimes it costs you. I mean, in this case, it wouldn't cost you. Would I recommend that you just jump into something like this if you're looking at 25 years to life? No, but something that you can prove your point and then have precedence for the next case, and something minor like this.
That's actually a very good point. If you're just hearing this for the first time, I wouldn't go out and get a speeding ticket on purpose just so you can give a cop a bill, because you're just looking for trouble that way. If it's just a little speeding ticket and you have the money, it might actually be a good idea just to pay the ticket so you don't get yourself in trouble, and do a little more studying so you can understand it, get a little more confidence, and figure out exactly what you're doing before you go jumping in with both feet. You might also want to do this stuff with little things like parking tickets or like jaywalking or something little. Have the money just in case. That way, if they say no dice, you're paying the ticket. Say, okay, here you go and pay the ticket. Another thing is, say you get pulled over and you get tickets for no seatbelt, speeding, no driver's license, your tags are expired, no insurance, and you got a whopper of a bill. You also, instead of fighting it and dragging yourself through their court, it could also be an option to send a very nice, polite letter, very short, very basic words, and just say something along the lines of, unfortunately...
I was hoping to get through it before the bumper started, Mike. I'll have to have you on. I'll have to talk to you and have you on again next week. All right, thanks, guys. Spin Against the Wall.
Don't let them fool you into thinking you're lawless, and you don't have to care. They can call it whatever they want, but they can't make it hate. Yeah.
I'd rather die than be a slave to thee. Don't treat me this way.